Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Amir Shervan's film Samurai Cop. So one of my favorite television programs is called The Supersizers Go. And in the episode, basically this was a show in which Sue Perkins and Giles Corran would dress up in period costumes of various historical eras and eat the food of the period. And in the episode about the Elizabethan era, Giles ate an umbel's pie, which is basically sort of large pastry shell with the innards of a deer and some spices. And he said of this pie that it is unique among culinary creations in that he had nothing positive to say about it. It's the kind of thing that a condemned man should eat as his last meal to make him glad he faced the noose. That's more or less how I feel about Samurai Cop. I understand from the Wikipedia page that it kind of has a cult following because of the whole, so bad it's good thing, but I don't even think it's so bad it's good. I think it's just bad. I think it's so bad that it's bad. There's pretty much nothing positive that I have to say about Samurai Cop. So if you love the movie, I apologize in advance. I think it's terrible. I think it's one of the most painful and unrewarding cinematic experiences that I've ever had in my life. The plot doesn't make that much sense. The writing is wooden and awkward. The acting is bad. The action sequences are not well choreographed. There's a whole bunch of sex scenes that are really pointless. They don't develop the plot. They don't really develop the characters. I hated the protagonist. Really the only thing that I enjoyed somewhat about the movie is when Okamura, who's this sort of older... So the basic premise of Samurai Cop is that this guy named Joe Marshall, who's a police officer, I think it's in LA or something, I don't remember exactly. So he's been brought in by the local police department to fight this Japanese gang under the control of a guy named Fujiyama, the Katana gang. And so Joe Marshall, at one point, he's trying to capture, theoretically, a guy named Okamura. And Okamura is an older guy. He seems to be a sort of, we're putting it in terms of The Godfather. He seems to be a sort of consigliere type figure, right? A sort of advisor to Fujiyama, who runs this gang. And Joe Marshall and his partner Frank Washington show up basically without backup. They have Peggy and a guy named Officer Carter, both of whom are also police. But they basically show up without backup, which they constantly do in this film. And Okamura is making his escape, and Joe Marshall, whose nickname is Samurai, that's one of the things that bothers me. I will get to that. So Marshall is going after him, and they have this big fight where basically Marshall shows up and he's like, "Oh, I've got my gun. Freeze, Okamura." And Okamura's like, "I'm unarmed. Why don't you fight me like a man, one-on-one?" And the early portion of that fight features Okamura kicking Marshall's ass. Joe Marshall, this is the closest he comes to ever actually losing a fight. And when Okamura was just punching him in the face, kicking him in the head, it was the best part of the film in my view. In part because I hated Joe Marshall. Um, so he's credited in the film as Matt Hannon, but the actor's name is Matthew Zadaris. Fucking terrible. Terrible. Everything about him, from the first moment I saw him, because his hair looks horrible. And I mean, I don't really have room to talk in terms of how people's hair looks, but like, it half the time it looked like he was wearing a wig. And like, so I think they were going for a sort of Lethal Weapon type thing where like, oh, we got Joe Marshall, and he's the like cool, sexy young cop who's all like, I'm wearing a leather jacket and jeans, rather than dressing properly for, law enforcement activity. And then you've got the not that much older, but slightly older African American cop, Frank Washington, who's a bit more like, maybe we should think about occasionally following the rules and not literally just murdering every person that we attempt to detain. Because they do. They fucking make one arrest, basically, in the whole movie, and they are only able to arrest that guy because they have shot everybody else that's in the van that he's in, to the point where the van crashes, lights on fire. This guy gets out. He's all like, I'm on fire. And they're like, okay, we'll put him out. That is the only person in the whole film. And they confront like 90 thugs from the Katana Gang. They do not manage to fucking cuff a single one of them. I take that back. Joe Marshall does arrest one random nameless thug. But basically, like, if you are a Katana Gang member and you go up against Joe Marshall and Frank Washington, you stand like a 95% chance of getting murdered. Despite the fact that they're police, and they're literally not supposed to be killing people. And the thing that fucking pissed me off most about that is throughout most of it, Captain Romer, who's their captain, and he's the sort of standard stereotypical, oh, I'm angry because you've done a terrible job, and I'm actually quite justifiably angry about that, because as a police captain, I'm actually sort of responsible for things like, let's actually make arrests rather than just murdering people at random. So Captain Romer is mostly, throughout the movie, like, Marshall and Washington, stop being terrible at literally every aspect of your job. You have not arrested almost anybody. You have produced virtually no evidence that we can use against any member of the Katana Gang, much less Fujiyama. You have gone to a restaurant and just fucking personally insulted Fujiyama with his lawyer right there. Like, everything you're doing is wrong and bad at being police. And so I quite like that. I don't quite like that because it's poorly written. It's dumb the way that it's presented, and the acting is bad, as it is across the board with this movie. But the ethos is fundamentally correct. Captain Romer is right that they should not be doing all the shit they're doing. But then, at the end of the film, right before the climactic final sort of action sequence, Captain Romer says to Marshall and Washington words to the effect of, I want you to go to that Japanese gangster's house and kill everybody there. I want it to be a bloodbath. Then you come back here and we will all turn in our badges. Yes, you will, because you've just given orders for extrajudicial executions of people who have not been convicted of crime. So you are utilizing your position as a police captain to encourage murder. Direct, cold-blooded, unequivocal murder. There is not even an argument to be made that that order is not to go out and commit murder. And of course, Marshall and Washington are more than happy to comply with this. So, where to start with all the horrible shit? Beyond the fact that these are literally the worst police officers in the history of cinema. Let's start with the fucking racism. So the Katana Gang is largely Japanese or Japanese American in its sort of upper leadership structure, but they actually seem to employ a lot of thugs of various races and ethnicities. So, I mean, on the one hand, that's sort of admirably open-minded of them. They clearly have not taken, say, the stance of the Sicilian mafia, where you have to be Sicilian in order to really be in the organization. They're like, yeah, hey, white guys, African-American guys, fucking whoever, we in the Katana Gang are happy to have your services. So again, sort of admirably multicultural organization. Diversity is their strength, except that they're not very strong because literally all of their henchmen suck. Right? It's the same sort of standard, like, bad cop movie, bad action movie, where you got a bunch of henchmen whose job is just to shoot vaguely in the direction of the heroes, missing everything, and then get shot themselves. But our protagonist, Joe Marshall, samurai, played by Matthew Zaraidis, or Matt Hannon, conspicuously not Japanese. He's very un-Japanese, in fact. Theoretically, the character speaks fluent Japanese. He's been trained in martial arts by samurai masters in Japan. That being said, he seems to know comparatively little about Japanese culture, Japanese people, so that's striking. Fujiyama, played by Cranston Komuro, probably is Japanese or Japanese American. Komuro, I would think, would be a Japanese name, so I have no problem with that. Gerald Okamura plays Okamura, so again, probably that's a Japanese name. Totally fine. Don't have a problem with that. The other big antagonist, ultimately the real antagonist, because Fujiyama is the leader of the Katana Gang, but he personally is not that much of a threat. The guy who's really set up as a threat, and the guy who's like, Joe Marshall, he's not a proper samurai, I am a proper samurai, is a character named Yamashita. So Yamashita is a Japanese name. I'm totally fine with that. On board. The actor is Robert Zdar, who is Lithuanian American. He's not fucking Japanese. Joe Samurai Marshall and Yamashita are decidedly not played by Japanese actors. So that's striking and problematic. You clearly have access to Japanese American actors. Why aren't you fucking using them? Why isn't Yamashita, a fucking character who's supposed to be Japanese, played by a Japanese performer? You also have Frank Washington, who's African American, and that's not a problem, right? That's not in itself a bad thing. But at one point, Washington and Marshall are hanging out, having literally just done something. I think they had a large gunfight with some of Yamashita's thugs, and everybody basically got killed except for the two of them and Yamashita. And Yamashita like rolled a grenade under their car and blew up their car. And Washington says something to the effect of, Captain Romer's going to burn my ass. And Joe Marshall, in a very stunningly not appropriate thing, is like, he says, I forget exactly what the line is, but it's like, yeah, charcoal black. Fuck, man, what are you doing? That's a fucking HR issue right there. You, like, don't be a racist. Don't be a fucking racist. Like, I get that this is your friend, and, like, you're, like, joking around about, like, oh, you're African American. Ha ha ha. Let's make a fucking joke of that. No, don't make a fucking joke of that. Don't do that. It's pointless. And you're bad. You're a bad person. You're a bad person, Joe Marshall. I know you're fictional, but still, fuck you. Then later, Yamashita's thugs are trying to find Joe Marshall's house, and so they end up going to Officer Carter's house, and they like shoot his wife, and they don't shoot his wife. They slit his wife's throat, and they stab him. They go to Peggy's house, first they go to Frank Washington's house first, and Washington is just coming out of the shower, which was, of course, super important for the plot, as you can well imagine. And they're like, we're going to take your towel off you, so now you're naked, and you got to fight us naked. And the one guy's got a gun to his head, and the other guy, like, takes out a razor or whatever it is, and he's like, and he grabs Washington's penis and is like, I will cut your black gift off. And, like, dude, fucking, I get that you're a villainous thug, but Jesus, fucking pump the brakes, playa. Like, this is not how we do things. And this is not like, I don't know, like, if this was like the 70s, I'd be like, okay, that's still problematic, but, like, understandable as an artifact of the time. This is the early 90s. I think this is 1991. And Shervan, who I think wrote this as well, was like, clearly that's an acceptable thing to say. Yeah. The other thing is Joe Marshall is constantly like, hey, every woman in this movie, do you want to have sex with me? And they're all like, why, yes, I would love to. Let us go and do that right now. And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. Mostly because I hate Joe Marshall, and I think he's terrible. And I just, like, I feel like it's the sort of thing where, like, right, like, I'm not a woman, and I don't constantly have guys hitting on me creepily. I don't have anyone hitting on me creepily most of the time. But, like, I feel like if I were an attractive young woman, or youngish woman, whatever it is, and Joe Marshall showed up and was like, hey, do you want to have sex with me? I'd be like, fuck no. Get away. Gross. Restraining order. Right, like right now. Instant restraining order. 500 feet away from me. Fuck off. I don't. It just grosses me out. And the fact that every woman is basically like, yeah, let's go fucking have sex for no reason with him. Just gross. I hate it. I hate it. I hate everything about it. God.